Welcome to the Blueprint for Men podcast. Today, we are going to delve into a subject that every time I have a podcast, behind me I have all these axes, ice axes, all kinds of tools made out of steel. And Proverbs 27:17 is one of the most well-loved verses in all of men's ministry, and that is, as iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another. And there's two ways to look at this. One is that when we come together as men, there can be actual improvement in who we are, or we can also tear each other down. Iron striking iron can have a lot of sparks, and there could be destruction and killing and everything else. But there is the side of it, I think, that we want to lean into on this podcast, and that is how we can become better men by coming together and going towards a goal of being more like Jesus. So today I've got my good friend and actually, second or third cousin, Tom Krein, coming in from Gentry, Arkansas. He is a master knife maker. He's been doing this for quite a while, and he's famous for what is called the Krein grind. Isn't that right, Tom? The Krein grind.
It is. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the term master knife maker, I don't know if that's actually a thing. I don't know.
You know, I can
I've been
call
doing
you
it
that,
for a
see,
while.
because I have no idea what I'm doing if I were to try to make a knife. So we'll call you that.
Yeah.
I know you're being modest, but that's good. So what I'm going to do, Tom, is just ask you a little bit about your background, and then we're going to get into this topic. But Tom, I know I've known you since before you can even remember me, probably. But back in the summer of 1976, that was my first real deep connection with you. I was in Lincoln, Nebraska. I was 16 years old, and I was working for your dad, working
Yeah.
construction. And every once in a while, I would be tasked with watching you and your little brother, Jimmy.
Yep. And I
And
would have been about 5 then.
yes, and I just remember just going, you guys would about kill each other, especially you were pretty much trying to kill Jim, it seemed like most of the time. So,
Well, I mean, in my defense, I wasn't really trying to do that because I could have. I mean, let's be clear. But yeah, we were a little feral from what I understand.
oh yeah, it was. I remember. I gotta share this because it's just too funny. So this one time, you were you guys were playing in this little kiddie pool. It was hot, summertime, and
I
I
know
think
this
you were.
story.
Yeah, I think you were trying to. You were basically semi drowning your brother Jimmy, and or hitting him over the head
I
with
think we were having a mutual water fight. I think that's what was going on.
a. Well, you were definitely getting the best of him. So I said, "Stop doing that, Tommy," and you just kept right on doing it. So I held your head under for a little bit, and you came up sputtering. And anyway, you did desist for a little bit
Yeah,
there.
I learned.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
that iron on iron thing right
yeah.
there,
The
right?
iron sharpened iron right then. So I know you were born in Nebraska in the Midwest in Lincoln, but tell us a little bit about your family, a little bit of the early years, and how Tom Krein became Tom Krein.
Right. So yeah, I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska. You know, let me pause this. Somebody's calling. All right, sorry,
That's right.
just making noise. So yeah, I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska, and about 1982 we moved to Arkansas. My dad had had open heart surgery, and just with the blood thinners, he really couldn't tolerate the colder weather up there.
Mm.
And so we moved down to Arkansas, and that's kind of where we grew up. I was in sixth grade when we moved. And yeah, formative years were kind of down here. Um, we lived out on a farm for a little while, and then we moved into town. I went to Ozark Adventist Academy right here in Gentry. I was in
Yep.
the village. And yeah, I mean, what do? You go to high school, and then, I in high school, this is interesting. One of my friends, my sophomore year, brought me a Blade magazine,
Okay.
And I just fell in love with knives right there. And
Wow.
I've always had a thing for guns and knives. Like I've always drawn them. I mean, when I was like little, like not much older than when you were trying to drown me, um, I was drawing guns and knives, and my mom, apparently she went to counseling over it. I didn't go. Um, and I had to stop drawing guns and knives. But, when we moved down here, um, my dad was a contractor. We worked construction,
Yep.
and we found we in this house we were remodeling. There was a whole bunch of gun magazines, and I took all those home. I read all those, so really fell into the gun world. My family wasn't really in the gun world, and then when my friend brought that first Blade magazine in my sophomore year, I just kind of fell in love with knife making, the idea of it, creating stuff with your hands. It was kind of in that outdoor venue that I love. Growing up in Arkansas, I loved hiking, being in the outside. Every summer we'd go to my grandparents' place down in Mountain View, and you know, we'd be wild little kids on the creek for a couple weeks every summer and fish and swim in the creek and use our knives. And then later when we got older, we started getting some 22s and stuff. And just I think I just love that whole idea and lifestyle and all that action, outdoor action. And I've really never changed from that. Um, we raised our boys hiking. My boys all worked in the shop, and Ben, my middle son, still works in the shop. So yeah, it's been a fun trip, a fun journey, right? Um, I told my English teacher, and actually not my English teacher, one of the English teachers. It was kind of a weird thing. The English teachers would switch every year at Ozark, but I got the same one all 4 years, which was fine. But I was telling the other English teacher, one of my friends, that I was going to be a knife maker when I grew up back in high school. And
No kidding.
she kind of laughed at me and was like, "How are you going to make a living at that?" And I'm like, "I don't know. People do it though." And,
I'll figure it out.
yeah, my parents in high school, what do you know, right? Nothing. You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And my parents had other plans for me. I was always going to be the doctor in the family, right? Um, go to college, all that kind of stuff. And so I went to Southern with that goal, right? I started nursing school so I could become a nurse and work my way through med school. And um, in nursing school, I started being in the hospital and doing nursing stuff. And I quickly realized that I didn't want to be a doctor, you know.
Hmm.
Didn't change my parents' plans for me, but it changed my plans for me, right?
Right.
Um, and there's nothing wrong with being a doctor. I just realized that I didn't want to go to school for another
Mm.
12 years. And
Right.
I could also see that they didn't have a lot of time out of the hospital for family or anything else really. If you're a
Right.
doctor, it's got to be a calling, and it's like almost 24/7, right?
Yep.
So it's a difficult thing. And so by that time, I could basically graduate with an associate degree in nursing, and I did that. And I just went to work, and started working as a nurse, which I started right there in Chattanooga at Memorial. Um, I worked there in the ICU, CCU, um, actually MICU, CCU for a couple years, and then got married down there. And then we moved back home in like 91, 2, somewhere 92, I think. So yeah, kind of a wild journey. And in high school, I bought a book called Knives and Knife Makers by Sid Latham. It's out of print now. You can find them, but it was published in 71 or 3, somewhere in there.
Way back.
Yeah, it's an older book, but it's fantastic, and it's all on custom knife making. It's got a section on how to make knives, and I read that book, and I read a couple other books because you got to remember when this happened. This is before before the interwebs were invented, right?
Yep.
So this would have been 92, 91, 92, 93 when I was reading this stuff, trying to figure out everything I could about knife making. And basically, in these books, there's one by David Bowie, there's one by Lovelace, Barney and Moran, and then this one by Sid Latham. There's all how-to sections. And around 92, 93, I decided I was going to start making some knives. And I made a few knives. They were pretty crude. I've still got a few of them, but I learned a lot, right?
Sure.
And being in Northwest Arkansas at the time, we have a pretty iconic place just about 20 miles east of here called A.G. Russell Knives.
No
So
kidding.
A.G. was one of the early founders of the Knife Makers Guild and some of this stuff. And so I was working at the time in Springdale, which is close, and I'd stop by on my way to work or on the way back or something, and I'd talk to AG and I'd show him what I was working on, and he'd be like, "You need to work on this," and then I'd stop by a couple weeks later and show him what I'd done, and he'd be like, "Do this or that." And one time when I stopped in, he's like, "You know, Bob Dozier is making knives for us, and he makes knives for himself, but his shop is here local. He's looking for help. You should ask,
Mm,
if you,
interesting.
try to get a job."
Sure.
Well, in that book, Knives and Knife Makers by Sid Latham, Bob Dozier is the one that does the how-to section.
Mm,
He's like, and also in that book, there's a lot of his work, and he was like one of my favorite knife makers. And it kind of blew me away because I knew he was from Louisiana, right? So what's he doing up here in Springdale?
yep.
Well, come to find out, he'd moved up here to work to be close to A.G. Russell because they were making the Morissette line of knives. And Bob was also selling a lot of his product to AG. So they had a partnership going. So I was kind of blown away by that and kind of excited. And so I went and I actually applied for a job with Bob. And he told me flat out, he's like, "I know you want to make knives. I will not teach you how to make knives, period." I'm like, "Okay, what do you got?" And that's one of the things that, you know, good or bad, my parents instilled a work ethic in all of their
Yep.
kids that is, it's pretty strong. Maybe
Yeah.
too strong.
Oh,
Maybe too strong.
yeah. I think
I
that you and
mean,
I both have that deep tap root.
yeah, I mean, and it's a good thing. It's not something I see a lot anymore, but good or bad, I've got integrity and work ethics if I got nothing else, right? So I when I interviewed, Bob's like showed me around, and it was pretty cool, pretty awesome. A lot of people had told me he was kind of a gruff guy, hard to work for, all this kind of stuff. You know, maybe not even using that nice of words. Um, but you get the drift,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, he also was making grinders at the time. He's like, "Tell you what, I'll hire you." And this, I was working as a nurse at this time. I wasn't making a lot, but I was making almost three times what he offered me. So he offered me $5.50 an hour,
Oh, my goodness.
come to work for him and make grinders, build his grinder, and clean the shop. And at the time, I talked to my wife, and she's like, we didn't have kids, so this was, it was just us, and she was a nurse too, so we were doing fine, right? We could do without the salary, so I took the job. I quit my nursing job and took that job. I still did like, you know, PRN type nursing. Every once in a while, I'd work a shift just to keep my hand in, right? Keep the skills up. And I went to work for him. And by the end of the year, I had the keys to the shop and I could do everything in the shop.
You won him over, man.
Well, it's kind of funny, and there's a lesson here also.
Yeah.
Basically, the three people that were working for him, he couldn't depend on.
Yeah.
They might show up, they might not show up. I
Okay.
showed up 10 minutes early every day. I was there, period, waiting on him when he got there. And whatever he told me to do, I did it the best I could. And I learned everything and I'd get caught up. So he had me making grinders. I got where there was grinders standing waiting to be sold, right? You
Now,
know,
explain what's a grinder. Some guys
so
might not be familiar.
so in knife making, the type of knife making I do, so there's two different kinds. There's forging, which you basically hammer on the steel on an anvil, and then you grind it. Well, some steels don't do well with forging, and you just grind on them. So that's called stock removal. So
Okay.
either way, you use a grinder. It's just what you do before. Okay.
Gotcha.
So I do stock removal. I don't forge. And basically this two inch by 72-inch grinder is kind of like the industrial norm. Well, Bob had patented this grinder design and was building them. And they're fantastic grinder. I've got three of them in my shop right now. And if I found another one, I'd buy it. But basically, he had me building these grinders, and they were patented and all that stuff. And basically, he'd get an order for one, and then he would build one. Well, I had where he had basically grinders just sitting waiting to be sold, which didn't happen. And somebody wouldn't show up for work, and he'd be like, "Hey, I need you to do this," and he'd put me over on whatever they were supposed to do for the day, and say it was making washers for the Morissette knives or something apart. Excuse me. I'd make enough so that we'd be like a couple years ahead. And then he'd move me on to do the next thing. And it might be making the handle blanks for specific knives. And I'd get us ahead on everything and he'd move me to the next thing. And literally by the end of the year, I was running the shop. He might show up, he might not show up. And I had the keys to the place. It was my job to open it up and get everybody started in the morning. And that went on for about 3.5 years
And tell me
until,
again, Tom, how old were you at this time?
so I would have been mid 20s.
Mid 20s? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, younger 20s. I probably started when I was 23.
Gotcha.
Um,
Fresh
yeah,
out of,
somewhere right
yeah,
in there. Yeah.
fresh out of those college years and the early employment as a nurse and just jumped
Yep.
right in.
Yep.
But you had a
And
vision. It sounds like you really kind of knew where you wanted to go, and this was just a stepping stone to getting there. Isn't that the way you viewed it?
I mean, it was definitely a way to get the information and the ability that I needed. It was like
Right.
getting paid a little bit
Right.
to go to school, right? But I don't know. So basically, when my wife got pregnant with Jake, and he was born in '98,
Okay.
um, I went to Bob and I said, "Hey, Bob, my wife carries the insurance. I'm gonna either need a little bit more money or I need insurance." At the time, I went that first year working for $6 an hour, and then he bumped me to 11. So I worked still markedly less than nursing, but I was
Okay.
making $11 an hour and I was running the shop. We were making a lot of knives. He might show up, he might not show up. And basically, he was like, "No, I can't give you anything more and I can't give you insurance." I said, "Well, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to quit." So I turned in my notice and I went back to work at the hospital, right? And I think that was a good thing, right? Because I could maybe still be working there. Who knows? Like I'm I'm like a company man, right? So I'm working for Dozier Knives and I'm like putting my heart and soul into it. And it's like it's also like I'm doing everything I can for the company, right? So him saying that I needed to quit was, I think, a good thing. It moved me to the next thing, right?
Right.
And so the next thing was I went back to work full time as a nurse and I built a shop. So my dad has a warehouse here in town and he let me build it's like 10 by 16 room inside of his shop, and I insulated it and I put a window unit in it for heat and air, and that was my shop for a while. And basically it had an island down the middle and tools around the outside, and I could I could make knives in there. You know, it wasn't much, but it's what I had. Um, and I had diligently bought some tools when I worked for Bob and stuff, and kind of slowly been building up my ability to make knives if I wasn't there. And so, you know, I basically was making knives on my own, under my own name at that time, and working at the hospital full time. And my wife was part time, and you know, life was good. And after about a year, um, I got a call from A.G. Russell Knives. And so when I worked for Bob Dozier, when I was running the shop, I was basically kind of the in between person between Dozier Knives and A.G. Russell Knives. You know, we did deliveries. If there was issues, Goldie or A.G. would talk to me or Bob, and you know, basically I developed a good relationship with them. And when they called me, they had me come over and met with me, and they're like, "Hey, we're looking for someone to restart our custom shop. It's been shut down for several years. You know, equipment's been sold off, stuff like that." And they offered me a salary position with insurance and 401k and all this stuff. And I was like, wow. So we talked about it, and I ended up doing that. I quit my nursing job and went to work for them. And I worked for them for about 2.5 years. We I built the custom shop out with tools and all that. And then we, you know, basically were building knives. And then when that I had I have a really good relationship with A.G. Russell to this day with the company. Sadly, A.G.'s passed on, and Goldie is running it now, his wife. And I still have a good relationship with them. But when my second son, Ben, came along, I felt that I needed to quit so I could spend more time at home and on my own stuff. So that would have been around, mm, got to think when Ben was born, 2003, 2000, no, 2000, right at 2000. So yeah, since then I've been on my own. I went back to work at Washington Regional in the ER here locally. Did about 8 years there, and I got a pretty sweet deal. So I got what's called weekend option. So I worked every Saturday night and Sunday night, and I did call Friday nights, and that left the week open for me to work in my shop here. And so basically, I worked two full-time jobs for 8 or 9 years, and then
Wow.
was able to quit nursing and just do this full-time since 2010.
Wow.
So
So that's so really from the time you started in making knives, been the early 90s, and then
yeah, 93 is about when I started.
so you
92,
had
93.
better part of 20 years of apprenticeship and doing pretty knew everything about it before you jumped in.
Well, I would say that there's about 5 years or 3 years that I was like an apprentice when I worked for Bob. Because when
Yeah,
I worked for AG, I was kind of like
running the show.
not the apprentice anymore.
Yeah, sure.
Even for Bob, I was running the show some of the time. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I've definitely put in some time and hours and done my due diligence.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So
So let's get into the talking about the knife making itself because I think that's really fascinating. Most guys have a fascination with knives. I just, I kind of tell in a little storyline that goes with this about how when I was a kid, this was in Lincoln, Nebraska. I remember I had a little hunting knife that was in a sheath hunting knife, really cheap,
yeah,
fake bone handle, and I had gotten a golf ball that I had found probably out at Holmes Lake Park, the golf course, and I was it said that it had a steel center. And I thought, well, I want to see if it's got a steel center. So I'm bearing down on this golf ball, not really knowing how
the
to use a
ball
knife.
rolls.
You know what happened? Just pretty much
Yep.
down to the bone on my index finger. I still have the scars here on my hand. But you just can't help yourself as a young boy to have a fascination with knives. And we have a lot of kids nowadays not growing up with those kind of just simple masculine activities. Getting cut with a knife is kind of
Right.
like rite of passage. And so, just that whole thing of historically, I think most guys had a knife on them. There was a knife in your pocket, on your belt. And I still like to see that with guys, but very few
Yeah, and
guys are
it
carrying knives.
I see quite a bit down here, honestly, but
Yeah.
it's more pocket knives, right? So the pocket clip has Spyderco kind of revolutionized the way we carry folders now
Yep.
with the clip
Yep.
and the hole in the blade and the one hand carry, one hand opening. And
Yep.
so, yeah, I mean, I think part of the fascination with knives is it's like our oldest tool, right? And it's
Yep.
it's the ability, like it's a utility item. It can be a self-defense weapon. It's just a fascinating thing for, you know, there's not anything really like it, right? So it's
Right.
like so many different things. And um even today we need to cut so many things, whether it's boxes
Yep.
or string or rope or opening packages, whatever.
Yep.
You know, I don't leave the house without a knife in my pocket, and
Yep.
my boys are pretty much the same way. My wife, yeah, she's not on board, but I think there's definitely a use for a knife in your everyday carry. You know, it's like it's just a really handy tool.
Oh,
You
sure.
know, nothing else can do what it does.
Yeah.
But
And I think that for me, for the last month and a half, I haven't had a knife on me. I feel naked. What happened? I was in Arkansas at a wedding. My wife
yeah,
was actually what do you call that? A wedding coordinator for her niece's daughter. Anyway, we're getting old when you have a niece's daughter. But
yeah,
anyway, I put the knife down somewhere, and anyway, so I need to pick up another knife. So
Marty, Marty,
I,
Marty. You
I
only have one?
I have another one, but it's not good enough.
Yeah.
But just this whole thing with knives and carrying knives. What when you started making knives, were you just making at your own shop? You've got folding knives,
Right.
locking blades, whatever you want to call them, and then you've got your
Mhm.
fixed blades. So where did you start in that whole journey?
Yeah, I mean, so I started in my garage with that Loveless book. It has a section on how to make knives with hand tools, and I used a file to take the metal away. I didn't have a grinder, and I
Wow.
used like a cordless drill or no, it was a corded drill, not a drill press, to put the holes in the handle and stuff, and like sandpaper to shine it up, right? Pretty basic. And
Yeah.
and that's the cool thing. You can make knives with pretty minimal tools. And then, you know, my kind of what I've always done is, so one of the things Bob Dozier was famous for was his fixed blades, right? Belt knives, not folders, right? So that's I call like any of the locking mechanism knives that fold folders. So whether it's a liner
Yep.
lock or a lock back or whatever. I didn't make those for a long time. I made fixed blades, and that's where I kind of carved out my market niche, right? So, man, for 15, 20 years, my market niche was that smaller fixed blade utility type knife, whether it was, a very small sub 2 inch blade that you can easily pocket carry or throw in a pack and or wear around your neck, whatever, and use to open boxes and stuff like that. And my price point on those, has been like that lower custom end, like $300 range. Um, and that was what I was known for forever. And at the same time, I started doing what's called what I termed a regrind, and that's where I would take, like, it started out with I did a lot of spider coats because early on, Spydercos were not a full flat grind. They were a saber grind. So it went only part way up the blade, and then the full thickness stock was all the way to the top, the spine. And so I started doing those, and then just behind the edge was also pretty thick on those early Spydercos, like 30 to 45 thousandths. And so what I would do is I would do a full flat grind. So I'd remove a lot of that material, and then I'd take the edge down to about 10 thousandths. And basically what that did is it made it just cut better. It's not as strong, but for a knife that breaks in the middle, like a folder, it's
Yep.
already broken, right? So you
Right.
don't want to be like batoning with it or prying with it. So I just made them into kind of high performance cutters. And I got pretty well known for that. I actually had to quit for a while because it was just taking over everything.
Yep.
And so, but I still do a few of those every once in a while, not that much. I raised my
Awesome.
price and just it's not a lot of what I do anymore.
Now, when you're
Um,
saying that, people would be shipping you their knives, and you would be working
correct.
on.
Sometimes I would buy them also, like I would buy, Spyderco Delicas or whatever and do them and then
I see.
sell the entire knife. But most of the time, it's just, you're paying for a service where I'm
Right.
regrinding the blade of your knife.
Right.
And like, say you broke the tip off or whatever, I can fix that at the same time and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
Did a lot of that over the years, probably thousands, which is kind of crazy.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I've been to your shop, and I saw you working on your grinder. Now explain to the guys what's your shop like? What do you have as far as its setup? I know you got a CNC, and it's fairly robust what you
Yeah.
do in there.
Yeah. So people come to my shop and they're like, "Yeah, if I had your shop, I could make knives like you could or too." And it's not really true because I couldn't make knives when I had this shop, right? Or I didn't have these tools. I could make knives, but I didn't have the tools when I started, right?
Yeah.
And so I've over the years I've reinvested in the shop a lot. I've expanded. When I started, we bought the building that my shop is in. I paid $10,000 for it. It's on Main Street in
Wow.
Gentry, and
What a
it was
bargain.
literally, yeah, it
Sure.
was metal building with 2x4s, and that was it. We like no wiring, no electrical, no water, no gas, no nothing. So
Wow.
I put about $45,000 into it and finished out the front 30 feet. So it's 25 feet wide, 30 feet. And I had a bathroom and an office and two rooms, a clean room and a clean room and a dirty room, right? And at that time I had two bandsaws. I when I built this shop, I sold a lot of guns, which kind of made me sad because a lot of them were not replaceable. And had I known, I would not have sold certain ones.
Sure.
But I needed tools, and the only way to get that was to you know leverage what I had. And so I sold almost all my firearms. Like I had about 30-ish at the time. I sold probably 30 firearms to
Wow.
to buy equipment. I mean, that was my assets, and I did what I had to
Yeah.
do to get the tools because I
Sure.
knew if I had the tools, I could make more money. And
Exactly.
so I sold everything pretty much I had. I mean, that's almost like a parable about a pearl, right?
Right.
And I bought a Dozier grinder, and I bought a metal bandsaw, and I bought a wood bandsaw, and I bought a mill. All three of those were jet. And then I bought some benchtop drill presses and went to work.
Right.
And with those tools, and over the last 20 years, 20 years, 25 years, I've been able to expand, pretty significantly. I've been doing this 30 some years, 33 years, I think,
Wow.
but no, not, I don't know. Yeah, 33 years, I think. But basically at this point, I've got a folder area. I've got a grinding area. My son Ben has two workbenches that are his area. And we've got more saws and more, grinders, all that stuff. separate workspaces. I've got even room like my friend Chris Taylor when he moved. He didn't have a shop for a year plus, and I'm like, hey, I got extra space, come work. So I gave him a key, and he came and worked every day in the shop. He had his own space.
Cool.
But yeah, I've got two CNC, two Haas CNC mills at this point, which we use to make parts. It sounds awesome, like you can push a button and you get a finished product, but I haven't figured that out yet. We've got our own sheath area. We've done a lot of sheaths over the years. When I did some design work for Böker, they asked me to build sheaths for the knives that I did to make them kind of special, and I agreed to that. And then that led to them asking me to make sheaths for other knives and solve other problems. And that year we made a lot of sheaths, like a lot. And I decided that wasn't really what I wanted to do,
Yeah.
and told them we were done. And I think I threw away probably 500 or 600 sheaths that were molded, but I just didn't feel like finishing. So
Yeah.
um, you know what you want to do and do it, right?
Yeah. So it sounds like during your journey, there's been some times where you got pulled into doing something more than you anticipated, then you got to pull back into this is
Yep.
what I do.
Yeah.
So out of all the different types of knives that you make right now, would you say your folders are really where your sweet spot is?
Yeah. Folders are where I've put my focus for the last 3 years. I've been making folders since '09, I think. It's been a while. We've made quite a few, but over the years, without the CNC equipment, I'd make 50 to 100 folders in a year. That's a lot. Um, Probably closer to 50 most years. Some years, maybe not even 50.
Wow. So we're,
And
we're talking just one a week.
yeah, and I'd build other stuff also, like fixed
Okay.
blades during the
Okay.
time period. That would be my focus, and folders were kind of I would build for shows and stuff. But without the Haas, so that the CNC is a beautiful thing for
Sure.
folders because I can make parts and it'll hold a tenth of a thousandth of an inch accuracy.
Gotcha.
And so all the holes are in this right place and it just gives me some repeatability.
Right.
And instead of me spending a day making a set of liners for a folder, I can just keep the machine running back there and it'll make 10 or 15 in a day while I'm doing other stuff.
Right.
And they're all ready to start tapping and putting together and finishing. So it's really a pretty fantastic thing.
Yeah. So with the materials you're using, you've got to use, always trying new stuff. When I look at your all of your different blades, yeah, I'm amazed at the variety of handle types and blade types and
Oh
steel
yeah,
types. What's really hot on the market right now? And are you selling these all online? I know it seemed like a while back you were doing a lot of
yeah.
shows, but how's things going now?
Even when I do a lot of shows and I do some sales at the shows, most of the sales are online.
Are they?
So I've got a Facebook group. It's Krein Knives Group on Facebook, and that's where I really do 99% of the sales.
Yeah.
We still do shows. I do 5 or 6 shows a year,
Okay.
and we'll do some sales there. The the shows are usually like a Friday, Saturday, and we don't do sales on Saturday. So, never have, never don't ever plan to, and it's been honestly that's kind of been a blessing too because it makes you stand out,
Yeah.
and then it gives you a reason to talk to people and it's like a stepping stone to other stuff, right? So
Yeah. Cool.
it's always been a good thing. And it's kind of funny. It's kind of what I'm known for now, one of the
Yeah.
things. So
Yeah. That's interesting. There was just a little segue into a guy that I knew a little bit peripherally in Golden, Colorado. He moved into the town there and wanted to set up a mountaineering shop.
mhm,
And there were two other mountaineering shops in Golden. Golden's not that big. It isn't,
right.
right there up against the mountains, but he started out, it's called Bent Gate Mountaineering, and he was going to shut down on Saturday. He was Seventh Day Adventist.
Yeah.
And so everybody said, man, you'll never make it. Competition's too fierce and you're shutting down on the weekend.
Yeah.
And he says, well, we're going to give it a go. He's the only one standing. The other
Isn't
shop
that wild?
shut down, but he was convicted on doing things at a level that they weren't. And again,
Hmm.
that work ethic and integrity. I think that, when you make a statement about shutting down, having good boundaries in your life on
Yeah.
time, it plays into other areas of your life, it seems.
Well, it's interesting too. It's like, I don't know about you. As a kid, I almost kind of hated Sabbath, right? Because it was
Sure.
like, it wasn't ever, it was like, you can't do this or you can't do that or, that kind of thing,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And it's like now as an adult, it's like, I look forward to the Sabbath because it's like, I, I'm, I'm pedal to the metal 6 days a week.
right.
Seventh day, I can just relax. And
Yeah,
it's healthy. Like
yeah,
it's mentally healthy. It's like I don't have to choose a day or anything. It's like it's already picked out, it's set out, and the guy that created us knew what we needed. And
exactly.
it's like literally the Sabbath is a blessing now. And it's like I don't have to worry about mowing the yard. I don't have
Hmm.
to worry about anything,
Yeah,
and the way I'm built, if I didn't have that, I'd work 7 days a week. I
sure.
just cannot stop, but I
Yeah,
do because I know
yeah.
that I'm not going to work on Saturday. So,
I want to ask you a question. Something just came to my mind when you were talking, Tom.
oh no.
But this is fascinating. We think about, mankind and, the invention of, all these different types of blades and alloys and all this kind of stuff. But right away, right after sin, a lamb was slain with a
Yeah.
knife, with a blade. I mean,
Yeah.
swords and blades have been part of the whole story from the very beginning.
So it was, if I had to guess it, well, I don't know because we're talking about God who can use whatever he wants,
Sure.
right? So it could be a sword. We don't know.
Yeah.
I know that for a long time, man used stone, and stone does a great job. In
Sure.
fact, I contemplated writing an article for a long time, and I never did it because I'm lazy about that. But I was going to title it "The Luxury of Steel" because there's so many people in the industry that are like steel snobs, and it's like, oh, you're using O1 or D2. It's like the luxury of steel is amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at like some of the pharaohs were buried with iron knives,
Oh, yeah.
they're for meteorites. It's like iron, iron and steel, which basically iron is basic elemental, right? And steel is the addition of carbon and other alloys to harden it. That's how you get steel. But you can do everything you need with a flake. And that's one of the things that always drove me crazy when people are like, because I made small knives. They weren't designed. I have an extra large hand, pretty decent sized hand. Um, and I make small knives. And people are like, it doesn't fit my hand. I'm like, well, don't hold it like that. It's like Native Americans and people all around the world have been using little bitty stone chips to do all their field dressing and utility work and game work and everything for thousands of years, right? So I don't. It's interesting the whole idea of steel and iron and even copper. It's like there's some cool stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that kind of ties into what we're going to talk about a little bit.
Yeah, well, why don't we get into that? Just the whole idea of this iron sharpening iron. I'm just going to let you go for it because I know that you're somebody that works in this area exclusively, and you can't help but to have a lot of thinking going on when you're doing something manual labor, and some of the things maybe you've uncovered.
Well, and I think a lot of times when we're talking about the Bible, we look around us and we use our life experiences to interpret what they're saying, which doesn't really work because, you know, this whole iron sharpens iron, this is at the very beginning of the Iron Age, right? It's not Steel Age, it's iron. So it's
Right.
like they're not dealing with steel probably. Most likely what they have is going to be iron, which would be wrought iron, which is very different than what we have. Um, and the whole, I don't know, it's probably anyone that heard this at the time knew exactly what was meant,
Hmm.
right? But we don't because we don't do things the same way, right? And we
Hmm.
have different, when we think of iron, we really think of steel, and
Right.
that's our experiences with steel, which is a totally different animal.
Yep.
So it's very interesting. If you look at the word, it doesn't really, it just means iron, right? It specifically means iron. I think the word is like, I don't know, I forget. I wrote it, I looked it up, but I didn't write it down, which was a mistake.
That's okay.
But but it's just literally iron sharpens iron, basically, is what it means. And it doesn't tell you what kind of iron, right? And so at the time, I'm pretty sure they had files at the time, which would be interesting. Um, and when I did some research, it's like it could be filing, it could be like you know how you use like a butcher steel and refine the edge. So that was another thing that came up. Um, and then it could also be scraping, which you can, if you have hardened steel, you can actually cut steel and iron with it that is not as soft. I don't think it's any of those three things, honestly, though, because if you're going to use like a file, you're abrading, right?
Right.
And a stone would be an easier way to do that at the time. A file would be a very specialized tool, I think, at the time.
For sure.
And I reached out to one of my good friends. So I don't forge, right? So I feel like maybe I don't have quite the knowledge base there experience wise, but I have read a lot about this and I have friends that do this. And so I actually reached out to one of my friends that's in Chattanooga there, Ryan Johnson, who forges, and we talked about it for a little while. And I think I think where this is going and I may be wrong, but I think it's going to the last way, which is peening. So with wrought iron, also in the Iron Age, this also played into my thought. Iron is extremely valuable, extremely expensive.
Hmm.
And if you can sharpen it without removing material,
Mm.
I'm thinking that's probably going to be the way you're going to sharpen.
Mm.
Because otherwise, you could just use a stone, which would be more readily available and more likely than a file. So my thought is that what they're talking about here is peening.
Now
Okay.
explain peening. What?
So in peening, basically you're going to take like an anvil or something similar and a hammer. And I say an anvil. It doesn't have to be like an anvil like we think about, like a
Right.
150-pound anvil. It could be like another hammerhead. In fact, when I was in Thailand, they had a 3-pound hammer stuck in a stump, and that was their anvil, right? That they were hammering on. But something similar to that is what I envision. And then you take a hammer and basically you're gonna put your blade to be sharpened. And this was done all through the Middle Ages, even.
Right.
Um, you're basically gonna lightly tap on that edge. And what that does, it does a couple things. Okay, it thins it, which improves the geometry. So you're basically shaping it, right? So
Hmm.
you can fix like if you've hit like a rock or something and it's the material has been dented, you can start moving that material back into the edge.
Hmm.
And so you're basically, and this is what I really like, you're refining that edge, right? So you're reshaping and refining with light hammer blows. You're not wailing on it like you're forging it.
Interesting. I love this.
So this is going to be light hammer blows, which is going to reshape and refine it and realign. Okay, that's another word that is used in this process. You're realigning it. And basically it does a couple things. One, these types of material, it would also work with copper, are not they're not like hardened like steel, right? Steel has the addition of carbon.
Right.
But you can do something that's called work hardening, and this works with copper or like your low alloy irons, like wrought iron, and you can hammer this and it work hardens it. So you'll actually get wear resistance and hardening out of the process. So it refines
Interesting.
it, it realigns it, it thins the geometry. So
Mm,
you're getting everything. And the bonus is you're not taking anything away, right? So you're
mm,
not losing anything and you're keeping that super valuable iron, it's not going anywhere. And so basically you're refining this edge and sharpening it without removing anything. So you keep the iron, the valuable part. And in the analogy, this is, you're not, you're not wailing on someone with like you're hammering someone.
right.
It's a gentle process that builds someone up instead of taking someone down. And so it's a really neat analogy. And I think that's, in my mind, that's where this went, because at the time
Mm,
iron would be so valuable, you wouldn't want to abrade it if you didn't have
right.
to.
Right.
And there's also benefits to it because you're refining, realigning that edge, you're work hardening it, you're making it into a better product through the process.
Interesting.
And here's another analogy. The hammer, that iron that sharpens the iron, if you just set them there, if there's two guys together, nothing happens, right?
No.
If it's two tools together, you're not going to get that sharpening. That hammer has to be held by the master. So then that's how this happens. I envision it as a much more gentle process than filing or removing or any of this kind of thing.
Mm,
And it makes a better product in the end that's harder, has better geometry, and is refined. So I that's this is one of those verses that when I first read it, I was just like, this doesn't make sense to me. And it's always kind of bothered me.
well,
But
you
when I
wrestled. I love how you wrestled through it because I think that there are a lot of scriptures that people are, I'll just say it this way, we're lazy.
well, we skip over them. We're like, I don't know exactly what that means, and you don't look at it in the time period. And um, but yeah, this is one of those things especially because of what I do, I've thought about a lot, and
Yeah.
and I think this is where, if you lived in the time, I think this is how you would understand that.
Yeah.
So,
We over here at our campus at Southern, they've got a blacksmithing club and they've
mhm,
had quite a bit of, just guys doing that for years and some of my former students. And I've had some of our men's groups do some forging and
sure.
whatnot. It's just fun, good masculine activity. One of the guys that had been doing a lot of blacksmithing, he says, it's interesting that when you heat up that iron, the steel, you got to get it to the right color.
Yeah,
You get it too white and it's brittle and you can destroy it.
you
You
burn
don't
out
get
the
it,
carbon.
yeah, and it just becomes brittle. So, but then if you don't get it quite hot enough, then it's resistant. But he said when you get it to the right temperature that it's malleable, it really becomes in its molecular and all the atoms there, it becomes kind of like clay.
Yeah.
It's you can move it. And but what was interesting also is the color of the steel or the iron is the color of amber, which is described as a throne room of God, which I think is really a powerful
Mhm.
picture too, is that, when we're in the presence of God, he can mold us, and I love
Oh,
this
sure.
additional piece is that you're so valuable that it's going to be a sharpening in that peening way, very, very
Mhm.
carefully it's done and very with skill and thought and care. And I've never heard that before, Tom. I'm going to hang on to this.
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah, this is different than forging, right? And we're talking about different materials too. Most of the time when you're forging, at least knives, we're talking about iron and or steel and not iron. But this would have been done cold. You wouldn't heat this up to hammer
Right.
it.
Right.
Um, so I don't know. It's it's an interesting way. It's definitely different, I think, than most people think about it. But I think
Well,
there's a lesson there.
yeah, I want to ask you just to segue on that. Um, who in your life have you ever had that experience in your life where another man kind of gave you that, you know, that kind of guidance? You knew that what needed to be said, but it wasn't done in a harsh way. It was done in a firm, caring way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say my dad. Obviously, not always in that most gentle way, but
Well, I know your dad,
as
and
as
I could
growing,
just vision.
growing up, it wasn't that gentle. But later in life,
Yes,
as an
yes,
adult, then it became more advice, right?
yeah,
And so, it was guidance instead of oftentimes punishment. Maybe, I don't know.
hmm
When I worked for Bob Dozier, same thing. He helped a lot. And he would kind of be like, and he was also not the most gentle person, but he'd be like, he gave me good advice, right?
right,
But yeah, I mean, I think our fathers are, you know, they have a special place, and it's a difficult thing as a father, and until you have kids, you don't necessarily know this, but
yep,
uh, as they're growing up, you want to be their friend, but if you're their friend when they're growing up, you probably aren't going to be their friend when they get grown up. You
yep,
know what I mean? It's
totally. They
like
won't
you have a
respect.
you have a total different job when they're little
Yep,
than after they're older. And
yep,
so it's important to delineate that. And I don't, I'm not saying beat your kids or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. That
right,
that you're misunderstanding if that's where you're going with this.
right.
But I mean, sometimes you need to, but just kidding.
Well, yeah,
But
I
yeah,
get it.
I mean, spare the rod, spoil the child thing. But it's different. And then once they become young adults, then you can guide more and give advice, and
Mhm.
I think you've earned that at that point, and
Yep,
you then, as they get older and they have their own family,
yep,
then you can be their friend.
yep,
And you can always still be their dad and
right,
and have advice ready to go.
yeah.
So, but yeah,
Well, I
I,
know that for me and my kids, early on, I was sometimes a little bit too hard on them, but I also look back and I see where they're
there's
at in
no
life.
manual.
Yeah, and honestly, my son, he's a very disciplined, driven kid, and he needed, well, discipline wasn't early on, but he needed that external discipline.
Yeah,
One thing I tell dads is, hey, if you've got a kid that's real strong-willed, be thankful, but just understand that it's like their motor, it's their drive, it's their engine, and you've got to be there to peen them. I like this, kind of
yeah,
ding them as they go, give them plenty of love, but when they need the firmness, we got to step in there
right.
because they'll self-destruct. They will do things that will hurt them.
Well, and that's, I think, one of the things that is very interesting about modern times. We hear the the masculine, what is it, where everybody's so down on masculinity, right?
Yep.
And
Right.
that's really the opposite of what's true.
Yep.
Most of these people did not have that masculine influence, and the peening and the
Mm-hmm.
refining and the love that went into something
Mm-hmm.
like that. And
Mm-hmm.
that, I think, is a big problem in our society, is this masculine toxicity idea.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, I think there is probably such a thing as people being
Sure.
too much, right? But I think that especially young men crave that, and they need that,
Right.
and that's a good thing. It can be a very good thing.
Right. Well,
So
Tom, I don't know if you have anything else to just wrap up here at the end. I know that you've got your storefront online. It's mostly in this Facebook group I just joined. Yay!
right. Oh,
Krein knife,
awesome.
Krein Knife group. And anyway, if
Yeah.
anybody's interested in your knives and looking into your brand, go to Krein Knife Group. Is that right?
Krein Knives Group.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's
So
where
search
most
that.
that's most everything's going on right there.
Yeah. I've got an Instagram, Tom Krein, but I don't really do business there. I put pictures up. It's a
Yeah.
great place to see pictures, but it's an awful place to do business,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Right.
So,
Right.
but yeah,
So thinking forward in your life, um, where do you see things going? Do you see this handoff to your son? I mean, that may be a question
I
I shouldn't
mean, who
ask you, but
knows? I mean, I don't know. Right now,
yeah,
Ben's working in the shop and
yeah,
he's doing really good. And so, um, I want to see it go forward. We're talking about, um, so I'm in my 50s. I
yeah,
don't really plan on retiring. That's never been what
sure,
I'm about, right? I would like to change things. Maybe I've done a lot of teaching, grinding teaching at shows. I do seminars, and we've been talking about putting in a knife making school,
mm,
where you would come and stay on site and basically be here for a week. And that's kind of one of the things wanting to move forward with, starting a nonprofit to do that, school, and then that way I knife making can be pretty hard on the body, right? And
sure,
also, where I'm here at least 12 hours a day usually. So I think as I get older, I got to think about not being able to do that and maybe being able to pass on some of the knowledge and make a venue where other makers can come and
yeah,
teach also, not just for me, and just make it something that would be really special and like nothing else in the U.S. or the
hmm
world, really.
yeah,
So I've got a vision. I've got an architect firm that we worked with and worked up some of the stuff, and now we've got to move forward and try to figure out. I think the only way I can do it is a nonprofit, just
hmm
because of
hmm
the magnitude of the project,
hmm
and it also it's interesting when you do a nonprofit, it's no longer your thing, right? I mean, it is, but it's not
sure.
because,
You got a little bit more people involved. Yeah,
yeah. And so maybe that is like a legacy type thing that
yeah,
can carry on and live on after,
hmm
because we're not going to be here forever. We don't
no,
know. Every day is a gift, right?
yep,
So, that would be kind of cool. So I don't know. We're looking at that right now. I'm working with my accountant to figure out the best way to do the nonprofit.
sure.
And yeah, that's really our next phase in this thing.
Yeah, well, I think there'll be a lot of joy in that endeavor if you actually pull the trigger on it. I think you would really enjoy it. And what I'd love to
Oh,
see you do, Tom, is some of these insights from your study about everything from the materials to the process of, connecting with the old Hebrew and the ancient to the modern and the lessons that can be unpacked there. I think it's powerful.
yeah, yeah. This is pretty neat. I really want my wife to do a book. She's like a really good writer, and she's written for our church blog and some different stuff like that. And I think she
Nice.
has a talent, and I'd love to see her write like some devotional books and maybe pull some of these ideas from some of the stuff that I do in also. But she's got a really huge talent, so who knows?
Well, I know that any of these insights, it's amazing how Jesus, he used object lessons exclusively. I mean,
Yeah.
parables. It says I got to memorize the scripture, but it's everything he said was in parables.
Hmm.
And when you really break it down, it's true, And so the whole idea is he could say more by saying less.
Well, correct. And a lot of our pastors could maybe learn from that, right? But but in all reality, if he told you something, like just told you, it probably wouldn't stick with you. But if he
Right,
tells you a story and you
right,
have to figure it out yourself,
right,
you're going to carry that, right? I mean,
right.
it's just we're more interested and more likely to listen and follow that thought process if it's partly our own thought
Right.
process. So, yeah.
For sure. Well, I'd love to see that come about. I'm going to pray for that because all these years, it's nice. I think the word you mentioned is legacy, and I think that you and I and many other guys, we get past our 50s and on in life, we tend to go, what's my lasting legacy? And I think that craftsmanship, like what you do with knives, or anybody that does really high quality work, there is a level of legacy in everything that you do that a lot of people don't have.
Well,
Uh,
thanks.
how much of work in today's world is with a legacy in mind? A lot of it's just got to get the job done and move on.
Yeah, I know one of the things that I like is seeing houses that my dad built and
Yeah.
stuff like that, right? That's pretty
Yeah.
cool. And I told my wife, I said, if we sell our house, because we've talked about it, I said, I'm taking the mailbox with me because my dad, he built the house that I live in, him, my dad, and
Okay.
my brother. But I saw my dad literally lay the brick for this mailbox, and it's a brick mailbox, and it's not selling with the house. I'm digging it up, and it's
Nice.
going with me wherever I go.
Nice.
So,
That's great. I can tell you have a tremendous love for your dad, and I
so,
I would concur. He was really close to my mother.
oh yeah,
It's interesting, and my middle name is was your dad's middle name.
then it's the same as mine,
Yeah. And so anyway, this whole
and
thing,
the
which
same as my son's.
no kidding. So if any of you are wondering what that middle name is, it's Dean.
Yep,
But yeah, that's cool. I didn't know that. I was thinking your middle name was Dean as well, and then your son. That is really a
yep.
cool. That's a legacy piece right there. That's cool.
So is his son's.
No kidding.
Yeah,
Wow.
pretty
Wow.
crazy.
Wow. 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 Well, this has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time out from your Krein grinding and whatever you needed to be doing today. But I hope
Yeah,
some of the
no
guys
problem.
that listen to this will be inspired and just think about things from the context of the iron sharpening iron in a new way. If they listened all the way to the end, because this is
Yep.
long free form interviews. I have no apologies. It's just a conversation, and I
Yeah,
think a lot of guys appreciate that just natural connection. So thanks for spending time with us. And I would just like to say that I want to pray for you and your business and your family as we close out. Would that be okay?
sure. Thanks.
All right. Dear Lord, thanks so much for Tom. Thank you for his life and the legacy that he is creating in steel. He's a craftsman making knives. And this picture of iron sharpening iron and how we need other men in our lives. We need friends. We need to be that for our children. We need to submit to that from you. And I just love this picture of being peened, just that gentle tapping and forming and shaping and sharpening. It's not a one and done or a heating or a grinding. I just am really embracing this view that Tom just shared. And I pray that every man that heard him share that will really embrace that because it's such a accurate picture of how you deal with us. And we thank you, Lord. But be with Tom, give him good health, be with his marriage, be with his children, his grandchildren as he moves in life. And I know that we look forward to the day that all those that we have lost, I think of his dad, who I worked for back in my high school years and who I've known all my life, and he passed away now, that we'll see him and all those that we have lost. Until that day, may we be faithful and be that much sharper in your hands. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thanks, Tom. You have a good rest of the day.
All right. You too, man. Take
Okay, take
care.
care, guys. I appreciate each one of you being on this podcast. Until next time, be sharp.
Take care.